Right, so today we're going to learn how to do some cornhole. No, wait. No. Okay, so what we're actually doing today is we're installing Pi-hole with a recursive DNS setup. It's the ad blocking black hole that talks to the internet directly, skipping your ISP's DNS. Okay, so before we start, let me just explain what Pi-hole is and what Pi-hole isn't. So Pi-hole is not a firewall. So it won't block hackers, malware, ransomware, or your roommate streaming hentai on full volume at 3 AM in the morning. So Pi-hole will also not directly block YouTube video ads. So YouTube serves these ads from the same domains as the videos, and it's going to be quite impossible to separate them without some black magic. Pi-hole won't magically repair your trashy ISP router or your Wi-Fi that drops every 2 minutes. Or even that 2004 ADSL line still haunting your dreams like it's your uncle. What Pi-hole is a DNS level ad assassin, and today we're taking it up a notch, making it a recursive DNS server. It doesn't beg your ISP for answers. It talks directly to the root servers, fast, private, and zero patience for ads. Okay, so for this Pi-hole instance, I'm going to use Ubuntu server, and then I'm going to use VM Workstation Pro just to get a virtual machine up and running. Okay, so the first thing you can do is you can start by downloading this particular ISO right over there. So I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm just going to move on straight to setting up the VM. So in your VM Workstation, right over here, we're just going to do a little right click. New virtual machine that we can leave as is. We're just going to hit next. Then I'm just going to quickly select my ISO path right over there. We're going to hit next. Just going to give it a little name. So we're just going to call this Pi-hole DNS. Or just name it whatever you feel. Alright. So I'm just going to give it 100 gigs worth of space. You can leave everything like that. Just click next. Over here I'm just going to customize my hardware. So the RAM is fine, processors should be fine, but over here by network adapter, I just want to bridge it through to my main network, otherwise it's going to sit behind a NAT and it ain't going to work. So once you've done that, you just hit close, finish, and that should be it. Now we're ready to power up and we're ready to go. Okay, so with your virtual machine created, we're just going to power it on quickly. You can just hit OK there. Okay, so with this menu, I'm going to try or install Ubuntu. I'm just going to hit enter. It's just going to go through its initial boot up. It shouldn't take too long. So let's just give it a minute. Okay, so there we go. So right over here, I'm just going to choose plain old English. Not going to change anything there, not going to change anything there. So over here, it's going to assign a DHCP IP to your machine. So just take note of what that IP is, because you are going to need it later. So for my instance, it's 21.22. So I'm just going to hit done, because I'm happy with that. Just going to hit done again. So now it's just testing the mirrors. So just give it a second to test. Right, so everything looks to be successful, so we're just gonna go next. So over here I want to use the entire disk, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna hit a 1 and then it should just cap me. And there you go. Hit save. So once you're done with that, I'm just gonna hit done, then you're gonna continue. Right, so now you can just give your name. I'm just gonna use NE. Service name, I'm just gonna call it Pi-hole. Username is NE, and then for the password, just choose a relatively strong, good password, even if your server isn't gonna be live on the internet. Alright, there we go. Not gonna do Ubuntu Pro for now, so I'm gonna skip it. I wanna install OpenSSH server, so just hit space to select it, and then you can just go down to done. I'm not gonna use anything from here, so we can just go done, and that's it. So your Ubuntu instance will now install, so we'll come back once it's all done. Okay, so once your instance is done installing and you have hit reboot, you might be greeted with this lovely little screen. So to fix that for me, I'm just going to right click on my VM, and then I'm just going to go to removable devices, net or CD DVD and SATA, settings. I'm just going to click connected power on off. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to hit enter, and there we go. Okay, so now your Ubuntu instance should be installed and it should boot. So the next step will be to SSH in to that IP that you hopefully noted, and then we'll take it from there. And there we go. Okay, so with your instance installed, the next step will be to SSH into it. Now you can use any SSH tool you'd like. I just prefer Windows built-in. There's nothing wrong with it for me. So I'm just gonna type in SSH username at, and then the IP we noted. I'm just gonna say yes. Okay, so now you just key in the password that you created, and there we go. Inside your Linux instance. So now that we're SSH'd into our server, there are just a couple of commands that I'd like to run before I start doing anything. So the first one is just an update and upgrade command, just to ensure everything is nice and up to date. So it's going to ask you for your password again. You can just key it in, and there we go. Okay, so while that's running, and this also shouldn't take too long. It is normally quick, but it also depends on your internet connectivity and then your resources you assign to the device, or well, the server. Okay, so we see everything is done. So the next thing I'd like to change is just my time zone. So I'm in South Africa, so that will be the correct one for me. And then I just paste it in there. I hit enter, and just to ensure that I am on the correct time zone, I'll just hit it up and then just remove everything I don't need, hit enter, and there we go. Local time seems to be correct. Yes, it is 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so the next step will be to install Pi-hole. So we're going to need this little command here. So this command I got right over here. So this is on the Pi-hole official documentation, but I'll just link all this in the description down below. Okay, so let's get back to it. So I'm just gonna sudo and then just paste it and hit the enter. Okay, and that's it. As easy as pie. Okay, so there's just a couple of steps we need to go through. So here we can just hit OK, another OK. Right, so it's gonna ask you for a static address. So you don't need to give your server a static address. You can also assign it statically under the DHCP lease table. But yeah, I'm just gonna give it a static address. Now we're just gonna choose Google. We're gonna change that to make the server recursive. And yeah, we can select next. Just gonna apply that, show everything is fine. And that should be it. So now it's just finishing the installation, and then once it's done with the installation, we can install Unbound, and then once we're done with that, we can hit the web page. Okay, so here's a couple of important things just for you to note. So here's your web address that you're going to use. So you're going to key that into your browser, and just note this password because that is the default password. Okay, so let's move on. Let's get Unbound quickly, or installed quickly, and then from that we'll move on to the web interface. So the next step will be to install Unbound, and that's going to help us make the server recursive. So I highly recommend just following this on Pi-hole's official documentation, because this config file we're going to need to copy and paste right over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to copy this command over here, and then we're going to go back to our SSH instance. We're going to paste it, and we're going to hit enter. We're just going to say yes. Okay, so now we just wait for it to finish, and there we go, all done. Okay, so the next step will be to create this config file with this information. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that entire directory with the file, and then all I'm going to do is hit sudo nano for the editor. I'm going to paste that in there, and then it's going to create the document or the file. Okay, so next thing we do is we're going to need to copy all this. So let's copy that over there, and then go back here, and we're just going to paste it in. Okay, so now just an important thing or things to note is just the interface over here. So this is the address we're going to need. That is just a local loopback address or just a local address, and then this port over here 5335. So these two things are of important note. Okay, so once we're done with that, we're just going to hit X to exit, yes to save, and then just enter, and there we go. So the next step, it should be to restart Unbound quickly. So we're just going to do that. Unbound has been restarted, and that's it. So our next step will be to move on to our web user interface, and then we configure it from there. Cool. And here we are, our web user interface. So we're just going to log in quickly using the password we used previous, or that was shown previously. So we're just going to enter that in there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit settings, DNS, and then just remove that, because we're not going to use any of the public name servers, because we're going to use Recursive. So the next step will be then to click by custom DNS servers. And well, you can just copy this over here if you'd really like, because that's what we're gonna do. So it's that local loopback address that I showed you earlier, with just a hash and then the port number. Hey, don't do what I just did. So just a hash and then the port number. All right, so now we can just save and apply, and that's it. So our recursive Pi-hole has been set up, but we're not done yet. So the next thing we need to do is we need to either point our device towards or to the new DNS server, or we can just log into our router and then just update that there. So yeah, for this instructions, I'm just going to use my router, because it's going to be a lot easier than going to each and every device and manually configuring the DNS, because that might also just make issues. So let's go to the next step and configure the router. Right, so before we start with the DNS configuration on the router, I just came to your mom's favorite site quickly here, bbc.com, just to show you that this site is quite peppered with ads. So there's an ad over there, there's an ad over there, there's an ad over there, so yeah, and there's an ad over there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to log into our router. So I use a MikroTik router. So I have a separate tool that I can log into the router with. So your router, if you just have a generic 10.tp link or whatever, you might just have to use your web user interface, and the setup for the DNS might just be different. So I'm just going to log into my router quickly, as you can see, and this is it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change IP DNS. As you can see, I was just now using generic public name servers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the one name server and just add the new DNS server, apply, and okay. So you'll see I'm not allowing any remote requests for those that use MikroTik. That's for the pure reason as I don't want external requests for DNS from networks outside of my own. So I'm just entering that DNS there so that the router itself can still resolve the domain names needed for updates and that sort of thing. So for my clients on my LAN, I'm just going to go to IP, DHCP server, and then click on networks, and I'm just going to update the DNS over here. So the DNS server, I'm going to remove the one, and I'm just going to enter my one. Okay. So now once that's done, there's two things I like to do before I start testing sites and that sort of thing. So let me just get my terminal over here. So the first thing I like to do is just do a quick DNS flush, and then the second thing I like to do is just to renew my IP. Okay, there we go. So now what we can do is we can just reload BBC, and then we should start getting some hits. Oh, first thing I'm seeing is absolutely no ads. And there we go. So let's just do another reload quickly, and we're not seeing any ads. All right. So that seems to be working. So what we can also test is msn.com, because I know this is peppered with ads as well. So let's just wait for that to load. Let's just close that. And as we can see, no ads are loading. So we can see over here there was supposed to be an ad where it states sponsored, but there's absolutely nothing. Over here as well, sponsored, no ads. So it seems to be working. So if we come back here, we can click on query log, and there we can see all our queries currently being made. So that's it. So we can see our DNS server is working, it's resolving, so the recursive server is working, so you're now nice and secure, and you're operating your own DNS server from your own network, so you don't have to rely on public DNS servers going down, and you don't have to rely on your ISP to provide DNS for you. Yeah, that's it. As I said, it's easy as pie. So just a couple of notes before I end this video. What you just need to note is this VM needs to be always powered on, because if you do power it off, you're not going to have a DNS server, so your DNS names won't resolve, so you won't be able to load any sites unless you connected them directly with the IP. But yeah, you're going to have to need to know each and every IP of each and every site to do that. So just an important note, keep this server on. If you do by accident power it off, just power it on again, and then just give it a minute or two and it should start working. And that's it. So for any more how-to guides or troubleshooting or any network related things, just hit the subscribe button, drop a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.